My sister called on a Thursday evening, 2 days before her wedding, and told me not to come. She laughed when she said it, not the nervous kind, the kind that comes easy when you know the person on the other end will absorb it, the kind you use on someone who has never once hung up on you, no matter what you said. Watch the live stream, Bianca told me. It will be beautiful. You will love it. Then she hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for what must have been 10 minutes, phone still warm against my palm, staring at the folder in front of me. Manila, thick. The tab read Morrow-Pruitt Wedding in my own handwriting. Inside were 4 contracts, each one bearing my signature at the bottom and the words Morrow Events at the top. My company, my name, $95,400 of my savings, my credit line, and 1 loan I had not told anyone about. Venue, caterer, florist, photographer. Every vendor hired by me, contracted by me, paid by me. Bianca did not know that last part. She knew I helped with costs. She did not know that I was the cost. Have you ever built something beautiful for someone who told you not to stand inside it? I should tell you how we got here. Not the Thursday night part, the 18 years before it. Our mother got sick when I was 18, and Bianca was 14. Breast cancer, stage 2, 8 months of treatment that took everything we had and then reached for more. Our father, Vince, had just lost his job at the paper mill. He handled it the way he handled most hard things. He sat in the garage with a bottle and waited for someone else to fix it. That someone was me. My acceptance to the University of Georgia went back 3 weeks before the semester started. A job answering phones at a party rental company on Abercorn Street came next. $12 an hour. Groceries, school runs for Bianca. Afternoons sitting with our mother during chemo while she held my hand so tight the knuckles turned yellow, and she said something I have carried in my chest ever since. You are the strong one, Celeste. Promise me you will take care of your sister. Not thank you. Not I am sorry this fell on you. Just another assignment, delivered in the same voice she used to tell me to clean my room. Yes, came out before the thought finished forming. Of course, yes. What 18-year-old says no to a mother with a tube in her arm? And here is the part I did not understand until much later. When I started paying for things, people started listening to me. My mother asked my opinion on dinner. My father nodded when I spoke. Bianca stopped rolling her eyes when I walked into a room. For the first time in my life, I had a voice in that house. And the price of admission was my wallet. I have been paying ever since. The wedding was supposed to be the last big one. Bianca and Nolan got engaged 14 months ago. Nolan is fine, quiet, works in finance. The kind of man who agrees with whoever spoke last, which in his family means his mother, Barbara. Barbara Pruitt is a retired school principal who treats every room like a classroom and every person in it like a student who forgot their homework. When Bianca told me the wedding budget, I did not blink. I had been saving. I had a business that was doing well. Event coordination in Savannah is steady work if you know the right people. And I had spent 15 years learning every florist, every caterer, every venue manager in Chatham County. The checks came from my account. The contracts bore my signature. Every vendor was handpicked because after 15 years in event coordination, you learn which ones show up on time and which ones fold under pressure. Bianca picked the colors. I built the architecture underneath them. $95,400. Every line item lived in my memory. The venue deposit alone was $14,000. The catering package, 42 guests at $110 per head, came to $15,800 with the open bar upgrade. Florals were $11,000. Photography, $8,600 for the premium package with a second shooter and a drone. These numbers lived in me the way some people carry prayers. By heart, without thinking, because they were the proof that I mattered. And now, my sister had called laughing to tell me I was not welcome. The phone went down on the table, screen side up. 4 contracts fanned out in front of me. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Something behind my ribs had cracked. a dry fracture running through the middle of something held together for a very long time. But my hands were steady. My father came to mind. He had been gone 6 years now. Liver failure, the bottle winning the long game it had been playing since the paper mill. Somewhere under this table, in the bottom shelf where old tax returns and shoes never worn collected dust, there was a box of his things my mother had given me after the funeral, still sealed. There had always been something else to do, someone else to help. The laptop came across the table. Vendor contracts folder, 4 PDFs, 4 cancellation clauses. Each one reads slowly, the way everything involving money and trust gets read, which in my experience are the same thing. Then I picked up my phone and called Suki. She answered on the second ring, which meant she was either bored or already eating ice cream in bed. Knowing Suki, it was both. "I need to tell you something," I said. "And then I need you to not comfort me. I need you to ask me what I am going to do." Suki was quiet for 3 seconds. That is a long time for an emergency room nurse who once intubated a man while eating a granola bar. "Go," she said. Everything came out. The call, the laugh, the click. When the last word landed, Suki did exactly what I asked. She did not say she was sorry. She did not call Bianca a name, though her jaw was working like she was chewing through a very thick piece of restraint. "What are you going to do?" she said. My eyes went to the contracts. Then the shoebox under the table. Then the ceiling, where a water stain had been spreading for 3 months that kept getting added to the list of things to fix. "Your hospital fundraiser," I said. "The Children's Wing Gala. You said they needed a venue." The line went quiet again. But this time the quiet had a different shape. It was the shape of someone beginning to smile. Suki did not say anything for a long time after that. The silence on the line had weight to it, the good kind, the kind that means someone is taking you seriously instead of rushing to fill the space with noise. "The Children's Wing fundraiser," she finally said. "They have been trying to book a venue for 4 months. The budget keeps getting cut. Last week, the committee chair told me they might push it to next year. What if they did not have to pay for anything?" Another pause. Then Suki laughed, and it was nothing like Bianca's laugh. This one had teeth and tenderness in equal measure. "Celeste Morrow, are you telling me you want to throw a charity gala with your sister's stolen wedding vendors? They are not stolen. They are mine. Every contract has my name on it. And the venue? Beaumont Hall has 2 ballrooms. Bianca booked Ballroom A through my contract. Ballroom B has been empty for 3 weeks because a corporate retreat canceled. Theo owes me a favor. Several, actually." Suki went quiet again. When she came back, her voice had changed register, lower, the one she used in the emergency room when a situation shifted from bad to manageable. "Okay," she said. "Walk me through what you need." We talked for 2 hours. Not about feelings, about logistics, catering capacity, table configurations, a sound system for speeches, parking, the hospital's donor list, name badges, a registration table. This was the language Celeste Morrow spoke fluently, not the language of grief or confrontation, the language of planning. And while we talked, the 18 years played behind my eyes like a slideshow nobody asked to see. Bianca's first semester at Georgia Southern. She called at midnight crying because her roommate was terrible and she wanted to transfer. The deposit for the new dorm was $1,200. My checking account had $1,400. The difference between those 2 numbers was the grocery budget for the rest of the month. Bianca's first apartment in Midtown Savannah. Gorgeous place, exposed brick, walking distance to the river. First and last month, plus security deposit, $3,900. She asked if she could borrow it. The word borrow did its job. It sounded temporary. It sounded like a bridge. Bridges go both directions. That one never did. Bianca's car. A used Camry, with a transmission that gave up outside of Pooler on a Tuesday. The repair was $2,200. She called me before she called roadside assistance. That tells you everything about who she thought of as the emergency service in her life. And now the wedding. $95,400. Not because Bianca asked for that number. Because once you start building something for someone, you build it the way you know how. And the way I know how is thorough. Somewhere in the middle of listing donation receipt logistics, Suki stopped me. Can I say something you will not like? You always do. You are not generous, Celeste. The words landed like a glass set down too hard on a counter. You are addicted to being needed, Suki said. There is a difference. A generous person gives and walks away. You give, and then you stand there, waiting for the applause. And when the applause does not come, you give more. That is not generosity. That is a transaction with a broken receipt printer. The apartment was very still after she said that. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on Drayton Street, headlights sweeping across the ceiling. That is the worst thing anyone has ever said to me, I told her. Worse than watch the live stream? A sound came out of me that was halfway between a laugh and something sharper. Suki heard it and let it sit there, because she is the kind of friend who does not try to clean up every mess the moment it spills. When do we call the vendors? She asked. And just like that, the conversation turned a corner back to solid ground. Tomorrow morning, early. Before Bianca has time to call them herself. You think she will? Not yet. Right now, she is picking out earrings and posting her rehearsal outfit online and telling her friends how she handled the Celeste situation. She will not check on vendors until Friday afternoon when something does not arrive on schedule. And by then, the flowers will already be in Ballroom B. Suki made a sound that was half whistle, half exhale. Girl, even my divorce lawyer had better manners than what you are about to do to that woman Saturday. After we hung up, the apartment went quiet again, and the quiet was different than before. Before the call, the silence had been the kind that pushes in on you, the kind that sounds like a question you do not want to answer. Now, it was the kind that comes after a decision has been made. Cleaner, thinner, like the air after rain. My phone sat on the table with 11% battery. Bianca's name was still at the top of the recent calls list. Below it, Mom. Below that, Theo at Beaumont Hall. Below that, Iris Chen, Magnolia Kitchen. 4 names, 4 calls, tomorrow. But tonight, something pulled my attention downward. The shoebox under the table. My father's things. Brown cardboard, soft at the edges from 6 years of being ignored. My mother had handed it to me at the funeral reception, while guests were still eating deviled eggs in the church hall. These are yours, she said. Nothing else. No explanation of what was inside, or why she waited until the potato salad was being served to give me the last physical traces of my father. The box sat there now, patient, the way boxes are. It had survived 2 apartment moves and 1 kitchen renovation without being opened, not because it did not matter, because opening it meant sitting still, and sitting still meant feeling, and feeling meant admitting that the strong one was also the tired one. Not tonight. Tonight was for planning. Tomorrow was for calling. The box could wait 1 more day. It had been waiting 6 years. What was 1 more? Friday morning, 6:15. The coffee was still too hot to drink, but the phone was already in my hand. Theo Banks picked up on the first ring, because Theo Banks is the kind of man who wakes up before the building does. He had managed Beaumont Hall for 22 years, and in that time, he had seen every kind of wedding disaster, every kind of family meltdown, every kind of last-minute cancellation that makes venue managers develop a very specific brand of calm. Theo, it is Celeste Morrow. We need to talk about the Morrow-Pruitt wedding. Miss Morrow. His voice was warm but precise, the way a good hotel concierge sounds when someone important calls. What can I do for you? Ballroom A is booked under my contract for Saturday. The bride has informed me that my presence is not welcome at the event. A pause, not a long one, the kind of pause a man takes when he is choosing his next sentence carefully. That is unfortunate. Ballroom B. The corporate retreat cancellation. Is it still available for Saturday? It is. Then here is what we are going to do. The Savannah Children's Hospital has been looking for a venue for their fundraiser gala. Every vendor currently contracted for Ballroom A, the catering, the florals, the photography, all under my name and my company, will be redirected to Ballroom B for the gala. The wedding in Ballroom A can proceed with the space, but without the services attached to my contracts. Theo was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then he said something that told me everything about the man and the 22 years of weddings he had witnessed. Miss Morrow, you are the contract holder. If you want to redirect your services to a charitable event in my building, that is your right, and frankly, my pleasure. Shall I send over the Ballroom B floor plan? The first call took 11 minutes. The next 3 would take less. Iris Chen at Magnolia Kitchen answered with the sound of a commercial kitchen already in motion behind her. Pans, a timer, someone calling out an order. Iris, it is Celeste. The Saturday wedding. There has been a change. What kind of change? The kind where the bride told the person who hired you not to come. Iris went quiet, not surprised quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a question someone has been waiting to ask. Celeste, is the bride the same woman who came to the tasting 3 weeks ago? The one who called my prep team the help when she thought they could not hear? Something cold moved through my chest. Not shock, recognition. The feeling of a pattern clicking into place, like finding out the leak in your ceiling is not new. It has been there for years, running behind the wall where you could not see it. She said that? To their faces, actually. My sous chef DeAndre was standing 2 feet away plating the salmon course. He did not say anything because he is professional, but he told me later, and I wrote it down, because when someone calls my people the help, I remember it. Iris, would you be willing to redirect the full catering package to a children's hospital fundraiser in Ballroom B? Same day, same time, same building. Celeste, DeAndre will personally carry every tray into that room. What time do you need us? Have you ever discovered that the person you have been protecting is not the person you thought they were? Not a single moment of cruelty, but a pattern of small ones you were never around to witness? Julian Voss answered from his flower shop, Vine and Bloom, on Bull Street. The early morning light in a flower shop sounds different than anywhere else. You can hear it in the way people move. Slower, more careful, like the beauty of the place asks something of the people inside it. Julian, it is Celeste. Oh no! What did she do? That stopped me. How did you know something happened? Because you are calling at 6:30 on a Friday morning and your voice has that sound. The same sound you had when you helped me set up my first wedding, and the ice sculpture melted 40 minutes early, and you looked at me and said, Julian, we are going to turn this into a water feature. That sound, the one where something went wrong, and you are already 3 steps into fixing it. Despite everything, a smile pulled at the corner of my mouth. Julian had been 24 when he opened Vine and Bloom, fresh out of a horticulture program, terrified of his first big event. My company booked him for a small corporate lunch, then a rehearsal dinner, then a full wedding. Now he did 12 to 15 weddings a season, and every Christmas he sent me a card that said the same thing. Thank you for the first one. She banned me from the wedding, Julian. The one we built together. You are kidding. Do you know the Children's Hospital Gala? Celeste, you taught me how to arrange my first wedding centerpiece. You think I am going to decorate hers after this? Tell me where the flowers are going, and they will be there before the sun is up. The last call was to Maggie Odom. Maggie had been photographing weddings in the Low Country for 26 years and had developed the kind of measured calm that comes from standing in the middle of other people's most emotional day, hundreds of times over, while holding a camera steady. Maggie, it is Celeste. Let me guess. The sister. How does everyone know? Honey, I have photographed 300 weddings. The ones that start with the bride banning family members never end well. It is not a prediction. It is a statistic. A brief pause. Where do you want me Saturday? Ballroom B, Children's Hospital fundraiser. Pro bono if you are willing. Pro bono and then some. This is the story worth telling, Celeste. Not the other one. Not anymore. 4 calls. 47 minutes. Every vendor transferred. Every contract legally intact. Nothing canceled. Nothing destroyed. Just redirected. The way water finds a new path when someone puts a wall in front of it. The coffee had gone cold on the counter. Outside, Savannah was waking up the way Savannah always does. Slow and golden and unhurried. Spanish moss catching the early light like it had nowhere else to be. My phone buzzed. A text from Suki. Hospital board says yes. Donor list going out this morning. 160 confirmed so far. Celeste, this is really happening. 160 people. For a gala that did not exist 12 hours ago. Somewhere across town, my sister was probably waking up, checking her wedding Pinterest board, adjusting her veil, choosing between 2 shades of lipstick that looked identical to everyone except her. She had no idea that the architecture underneath her perfect day had just shifted to a different room. And the thing about architecture is this. When the foundation moves, everything above it comes down. Not because anyone pushed it, because it was never built to stand on its own. The rest of Friday morning was a blur of phone calls, spreadsheets, and Suki texting in all capital letters every 14 minutes with updates that read like dispatches from a very enthusiastic war room. Hospital board approved. Donor list going out now. Table linens sorted. White or ivory? DeAndre says he wants to do a crab station. I said yes. Was that okay? By 10 that morning, 187 people had confirmed for the gala. By noon, the number was 204. The Savannah Children's Hospital had been trying to raise money for a new pediatric wing for 3 years, and the announcement of a fully catered, fully decorated, professionally photographed gala at Beaumont Hall, at no cost to the hospital, had traveled through the donor community like a match dropped in dry grass. Suki arrived at my apartment around 1 in the afternoon, carrying 2 garment bags, a clipboard, and a sandwich she shoved into my hands before saying anything else. Eat. You have been running on caffeine and righteous fury since last night, and neither of those is a food group. We sat at the kitchen table and went through the checklist. Seating charts, donor acknowledgement cards, a sound system for speeches, a podium from the hospital's storage room that Suki had already arranged to have delivered. My hands moved through the logistics the way they always did, automatically, precisely, the way a surgeon's hands move, or a pianist's. This was what Celeste Morrow did. This was what Celeste Morrow was. The person who built beautiful things for other people, and then watched from behind the curtain. And that thought stopped me. Suki was mid-sentence about parking logistics when she looked up and saw my face. What? Nothing. Keep going. That was not a nothing face. That was a something face. Talk. But the something was not ready to be talked about yet. So instead of answering, my hands reached under the table and pulled out the shoebox. Brown cardboard, soft at the edges. The tape across the top had yellowed to the color of old teeth. My mother's handwriting on the side in faded marker. Vince, personal. Suki watched but did not speak. She knew about the box. She had seen it survive 2 apartments and 1 renovation. She had never asked why it stayed sealed, because Suki Delgado understood that some doors stay closed not because they are locked, but because the person standing in front of them is not ready for what is on the other side. The tape came off easily. 6 years of adhesive had lost its grip, which felt like a metaphor for something, but there was no time to sit with it. Inside, a watch with a cracked face that had stopped at 4:17. A laminated card from Alcoholics Anonymous, the edges soft from being carried in a wallet. A photograph of me at age 7, standing on his feet while he held my hands, both of us laughing at something the camera did not capture. And an envelope with my name on it in handwriting that looked like it had been written by a hand that was trying very hard to be steady. Cheche. Nobody called me that except him. The letter was 1 page. Blue ink on lined paper, the kind torn from a legal pad, dated 11 months before he died. Cheche. If you are reading this, Your mother has finally given you the box, which means either something happened or she ran out of reasons to keep it from you. Knowing your mother, it was probably both. There is something I should have told you when you were 18 and your mother was sick and you walked away from college without anyone asking you to stay. You did not owe your sister your life. You did not owe me your future. You did not owe your mother a promise she had no right to ask for. But nobody told you that. And I sat in the garage and let it happen, because telling you would have meant I had to stand up myself. And standing up was the one thing the bottle never taught me how to do. I drank because I could not fix anything. You fixed everything because you could not drink. We are the same broken thing, Cece, just in opposite directions. Here is what I want you to know. You have given enough. More than enough. More than any daughter should have to give. And if you are still giving, still paying, still being the strong one because nobody ever told you to stop, then I am telling you now, stop. Live for yourself. Please. Before the bill comes due and you realize you spent everything on other people's happiness and kept none for your own. Your father, who should have said this sooner. Vince. The paper sat in my hands for a long time after the last word. Suki had not moved. The sandwich was untouched. The clipboard had slid to the edge of the table, and neither of us reached for it. He knew was all that came out, barely a whisper. He knew what was happening, and he wrote it down, and my mother HID'd it for 6 years. Suki reached across the table and put one hand flat on mine. She did not squeeze, did not pull, just the weight of a palm saying, I am here and this is real. Why would she hide it? The answer formed before the question finished. Because if Celeste reads that letter, she might stop. If she stops paying for Bianca, who will? If she stops being the strong one, who holds the family together? Colleen hid the letter for the same reason she asked for the promise in the first place. Because letting go of the strong one meant admitting there was nothing holding any of them up, except one daughter's exhaustion. My eyes dropped to the laptop, still open from the morning's logistics. The spreadsheet was right there, the one that tracked 18 years of payments. The numbers marched down the screen in neat columns. College deposit, apartment, Camry transmission, emergency room visit when Bianca slipped on ice in 2018, a new winter coat because Bianca said her old one made her look tired, birthday dinners, holiday flights, and now, at the very bottom, one line in bold, wedding, $95,400, $347,000. That number sat in my stomach like a stone that had been sinking for years and only just hit bottom. Not because of the money, because next to every amount was a date, and next to every date was an empty column labeled reciprocated, 18 years of entries. Not one mark in the last column. Not one call from Bianca that started with, "How are you, Celeste?" Not one offer to help. Not one birthday card that was not a text message sent 3 days late, $347,000, and 0 questions about whether the person paying was okay. Celeste. Suki's voice was careful now. The gala. You know this is still you doing for other people, right? Different people. Better cause. But still the same. Celeste building something beautiful and standing behind the curtain. The truth of it landed clean, the way a good punch does, right in the center of something that was already bruised. Maybe was all that came back. But those kids in the pediatric wing did not ban me from their party. Those kids did not call anyone to help. Those kids actually need what I am building. A pause. Something shifted, not in the room, but somewhere behind the ribs, in the place where decisions live before they become words. There is a difference between giving because you are afraid to stop and giving because someone genuinely needs it. Dad spent his whole life not knowing the difference. Maybe I am just now learning it. Suki picked up the clipboard. The sandwich. The garment bags. Good, she said. Now eat the sandwich and get dressed. We have a gala to build and about 19 hours to do it. The letter went into my jacket pocket, not back in the box. The box was for things being kept. The pocket was for things being carried. Friday afternoon came in fast, the way trouble does when it finally figures out where you live. The gala preparation was moving at a pace that should not have been possible. Julian had arrived at Beaumont Hall by 2, with 3 assistants and a van full of white peonies, hydrangeas, and eucalyptus that he had pulled from 3 separate orders to fill the room. Iris had her team prepping in the ballroom B kitchen by 3, DeAndre personally overseeing every station with the kind of quiet intensity that said this was no longer just a job. Maggie had sent over a shot list and a lighting plan that turned the room into something that looked like it had been in the works for months, not hours. Suki and the hospital fundraising team were handling the donor side. Name tags, table assignments, a printed program with the hospital logo on the front, and a photo of the pediatric wing on the back. 212 confirmed guests. The energy in the building was the kind you feel before something good happens. The collective hum of people who know they are part of something that matters. And then my phone rang. The screen said Bianca. My thumb hovered. Every instinct built over 18 years of answering, of fixing, of being the one who picks up no matter what, pulled toward the green button. The muscle memory of a lifetime of saying yes. But the letter was in my jacket pocket, and the letter said stop. The phone rang 4 times. On the 5th ring, just before voicemail, something overrode the letter and the instinct and everything Suki had told me the night before. Not love, not forgiveness, curiosity. The need to hear what Bianca's voice sounded like when she wanted something back. Celeste. Her voice was different, softer. The kind of soft that takes effort, like someone pressing a crease into fabric that wants to wrinkle. Listen, about yesterday, the phone call. The things I said. She paused, waiting for me to fill the space the way I always had, the way the strong one always does. The space stayed empty. I was stressed, Bianca continued. You know how weddings are. Everything was piling up and Barbara kept saying things, and I reacted. I should not have said what I said. Of course I want you there. You are my sister. The words were right. The order was right. The tone was calibrated to hit every soft spot in the architecture of our relationship. Every beam she knew was load-bearing. But something was missing. The word sorry. She had talked around it, under it, beside it, but never through it. In 2 minutes of speaking, Bianca had managed to explain, justify, contextualize, and reframe without once actually apologizing. Bianca, did something happen with the vendors today? The pause that followed was 3 seconds long, but it told me everything. 3 seconds is not long enough to think of a lie, but it is long enough to decide whether to use one. What do you mean? Did you call anyone today? The florist? The caterer? Anyone? I called Julian to confirm the centerpieces, and he said something about a contract review? It did not make sense, and Iris is not returning my messages. And Theo said something about Ballroom B that I did not understand. Celeste, what is going on? There it was. Not I miss you, not I was wrong. What is going on with the vendors? Suki's words from last night surfaced. She does not want you. She wants your vendors. Bianca, when you called Iris's team at the tasting 3 weeks ago, what did you call them? Silence. A different kind this time. Not confusion. Recognition. The sound of someone realizing they have been caught not by a trap, but by their own footprints. That is not, I was having a bad day, and they were slow with the plates, and I did not mean it like that. You called them the help. Celeste, please. You called a professional kitchen team who spent 6 hours preparing a custom tasting menu for your wedding, the help, to their faces. And you did not tell me, and you did not apologize to them. And now you are calling me, not because you are sorry, but because the flowers are not where you expected them to be. At what point does forgiveness become permission to keep hurting you? When is the last time you forgave someone and they took it as an invitation to do it again? If you call again, my voice was level, the way water is level just before it drops over an edge. I will not answer. The line went dead, not because she hung up, because there was nothing left to transmit. 20 minutes later, Suki called from downstairs in the ballroom. Heads up, Bianca just called Julian directly, crying, asking him to bring the flowers back to Ballroom A. Julian told her, and this is a direct quote, "Ma'am, my contract is with Morrow Events. You will need to speak with the contract holder." She hung up on him. He is fine. He is actually smiling. Despite everything, a sound came out that might have been a laugh. Julian smiling while someone hung up on him was the most Julian thing imaginable. "There is more," Suki said. "The groom called the venue." "Nolan?" Theo said Nolan Pruitt called 20 minutes ago, asking who the contract holder was for the Morrow-Pruitt wedding, Theo told him. And apparently there was a very long silence on the line after that. Nolan. Quiet, careful, conflict-avoiding Nolan, who had probably assumed his mother-in-law or some distant family fund was handling the bill, who had probably never asked because asking meant knowing, and knowing meant being responsible for what he knew. Now he knew. Theo said Nolan asked one more question before hanging up. Suki continued. He asked, "Did my fiancée know her sister was paying for everything?" What did Theo say? Theo said, "Sir, that is a question for your fiancée, not your venue manager." Somewhere in a house across Savannah, Nolan Pruitt was sitting with a piece of information that changed the shape of his Saturday. Not the wedding itself, the person he was marrying. The question was not whether he would confront Bianca. The question was whether confronting her would change anything, or whether he was the kind of man who would file the truth away in the same drawer where he kept every other uncomfortable thing his mother told him to ignore. The gala preparation continued through the evening. By 9, the room was nearly complete. Julian's flowers caught the light from the chandeliers and threw soft shadows across the white tablecloths. The hospital logo stood on an easel by the entrance. A banner above the stage read, "Building Tomorrow's Care, one night at a time." Suki stood next to me in the doorway of Ballroom B, arms crossed, surveying the room like a general the night before a battle she intended to win. "It is beautiful," she said. It was. But something nagged at the back of my mind, a question I could not shake. The gala was good. The cause was real. The execution was flawless. But tomorrow morning, 30 feet away through one wall and 2 doors, my sister would walk into an empty room in a white dress and discover that the person she had dismissed was the same person who had built everything she was standing on. And the part of me that had spent 18 years being the strong one, the fixer, the one who shows up, that part was not celebrating. That part was asking a question it had never asked before. What if being right is not the same thing as being free? Friday night. The gala room was finished. The apartment was quiet. And for the first time in 48 hours, there was nothing left to organize. No vendor to call, no logistics to arrange, no emergency to solve. Just the quiet, and me inside it. Suki had gone home to sleep for a few hours before the morning setup. Julian was driving back from the wholesale market with a last batch of greenery for the stage backdrop. Iris was prepping cold appetizers that would hold overnight. Everyone was doing their part, and my part, for once, was nothing. Nothing is a hard thing to do when you have spent your entire adult life being something for somebody. The phone sat on the kitchen counter. 14 missed calls from Bianca. 3 texts, each one shorter than the last. The first one said, "Celeste, can we please talk about this like adults?" The second said, "This is insane." The third said only, "Call me." Below those, 1 missed call from Colleen. No text, just the call, sitting there like a door left open. My thumb pressed the call back before the decision fully formed. Some calls are not made by the brain. They are made by the body, by the muscle memory of 20 years of picking up when your mother's name appears on the screen. She answered on the first ring. Her voice had that particular softness that meant she had been waiting, not sleeping, just sitting somewhere with the phone nearby, the way she sat during chemo treatments, the way she sat when Vince was in the garage, the way she sat through everything. Colleen Morrow had turned waiting into a posture. "Celeste, honey," a breath. "Bianca is very upset." Not, "How are you?" Not, "What happened?" Not, "Are you okay?" Bianca is very upset. The sentence that had opened every phone call about my sister for 18 years. The 4 words that meant, "Fix it." "She called me today, Mom." She apologized. Except she did not actually apologize. She explained why what she did was understandable, and then asked about the vendors. She is stressed. You know how she gets before big events. There it was, the sentence. 7 words that had run underneath every confrontation, every slight, every moment where Bianca had taken and Celeste had given and nobody in the family had said, "Wait, that is not fair. Just let her have her day. You know how she gets." "Mom, do you know how much I paid for this wedding?" "You offered to help Celeste." "That was very generous of you." $95,400. Venue, catering, flowers, photography, every contract in my name, every dollar from my savings, and a loan I have not finished paying. I did not help, Mom. I built it, all of it. And she banned me. Colleen was quiet. The kind of quiet that is not empty, but full. The way a glass is full right before it spills. "She is your sister," Colleen said, "huh?" And then, with the mechanical precision of someone saying a prayer they no longer believe in, but cannot stop reciting, family forgives. Something behind my sternum moved. Not rage. Something quieter and older and more tired than rage. The feeling of a rope that has been holding something up for a very long time and has finally begun to fray, not because the weight increased, but because the rope was never meant to hold that much in the first place. "No, Mom. Not this time. I have let her have her day for 18 years. Every day has been her day. College was her day. The apartment was her day. The car was her day. This wedding was supposed to be her day. And my days, Mom, my days were spent paying for hers." Colleen made a sound. Small, wet, the kind of sound that escapes before you can stop it. I found the letter. The wet sound stopped. Dad's letter. "In the shoebox you gave me after the funeral, the one you told me was just personal items. How long did you know it was in there?" Colleen did not answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was barely a thread. "He wrote it the year before he passed. He asked me to give it to you. You had it for 6 years. I was going to give it to you. I was always going to give it to you. But the thread got thinner. If you read it, I thought you might stop." "Stop what?" "Taking care of things. Taking care of her. Taking care of all of it. You were the only one holding us together, Celeste. If you read that letter and you stopped, who would? Who would keep everything from falling apart?" The answer sat between us like a stone dropped into still water. Nobody, Mom. That is the answer. Nobody would keep it together, because it was never supposed to be held together by one person paying for everything. That is not a family. That is a billing arrangement. But those words did not come out. Not because they were wrong, but because saying them to a 62-year-old woman who had spent her whole life being taken care of, first by a husband who drank, and then by a daughter who paid, felt like removing the last chair from a room someone was still trying to sit down in. What came out instead was this: "I love you, Mom. But I am done being the strong one," Colleen cried. Not loudly. The kind of crying that sounds like it has been waiting in a closet for years and finally found the door unlocked. The call ended without a goodbye. Not because either of us was angry. Because some conversations do not have a clean ending. They just run out of air, and what is left is the silence, and the silence is the truest part. The apartment was very still afterward. The counter, the coffee mug from this morning, still unwashed. The laptop, closed now. The letter in my jacket pocket. A small rectangle of weight against my chest. For the first time in as long as memory reached, there was nobody to call. Nobody to fix. Nobody to save. Nobody to pay. Just a woman sitting in a kitchen in Savannah on a Friday night, the night before the most expensive Saturday of her life, learning what it felt like to put herself down. Not down as in defeated, down as in a weight she had been carrying. She set it down, and the room, for the first time, felt large enough to breathe in. Saturday morning arrived the way consequences do. Quietly, and then all at once. By 10, Julian's team had transformed Ballroom B into something that looked like it had been planned for months. White peonies and eucalyptus lined every table in arrangements that climbed upward like they were reaching for the chandeliers. Candles and glass holders caught the light and scattered it across the ceiling in slow-moving constellations. The hospital banner hung above a small stage where a podium waited with a microphone and a glass of water that Suki had placed there at exactly 9:45 because she said all good speeches start with hydration. Iris had her team plating appetizers by 11. DeAndre stood at the center of the kitchen, directing traffic with the calm authority of someone who had decided this was not a last-minute charity event, but the most important dinner of his career. When Julian walked through with a final armload of greenery for the stage backdrop, DeAndre stopped him and said, "Tell Miss Morrow the crab cakes are personal. She will know what that means." Julian did not know what it meant, but he delivered the message, and when it reached me, one hand pressed flat against my chest because DeAndre's crab cakes were the same ones Bianca had tasted at the menu preview and called acceptable. I guess he had made them perfect anyway. For someone who would notice. At noon, Maggie arrived with her second shooter and began documenting the gala setup. She moved through the room the way she moved through every event, quietly, seeing everything, her camera clicking in a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. "Celeste," she said, pausing near the stage, "whatever happens next door, do not look at it. Stay in this room. This is the story today." At 1:30, the first gala guests began arriving. Women in cocktail dresses and men in sport coats, hospital board members, local business owners, families whose children had spent weeks or months in the pediatric wing, 219 people, each one holding a name tag and a program that said, "Building Tomorrow's Care, one night at a time." Suki appeared beside me in a navy dress, clipboard in hand, earpiece in one ear, like she was running a small but well-organized military operation. 219 confirmed and seated. Crab Station is a hit. Julian says the peonies are behaving. And the hospital director just told me this is the largest single-event fundraiser they have had in 9 years. She paused, looked at me. "You built this in 36 hours, Celeste. We built this. Fine. But the contracts had your name on them, and the idea came from your kitchen table after your sister laughed at you. So take the credit. Just this once. You have earned it." At exactly 2 in the afternoon, something shifted on the other side of the wall. Ballroom A had been open since 1. The chairs were set in neat rows, white covers pressed and clean, because the venue had provided those as part of the room rental. The arch at the front stood bare, white wood and nothing else. No flowers, no ribbon, no photographer adjusting angles, no string quartet tuning in the corner, no caterer setting out champagne glasses. The room was arranged for a wedding the way a table is set for dinner when no one is coming to eat. Everything in its place. Nothing in its purpose. The first guests had arrived at 1:15. A woman in a blue hat walked to the third row, sat down, and looked around. Then looked around again. The couple behind her did the same. A murmur started at the back of the room and traveled forward like a slow wave, each new arrival adding their own confusion to the current. Where are the flowers? Is the caterer running late? Why is there no music? Bianca arrived at 1:45 in a white gown that cost $3,000 and fit her like it had been sewn directly onto her skin. She walked through the entrance expecting to step into her life's most beautiful room, and instead stepped into an arrangement of empty chairs and bare surfaces that looked like a wedding that had been evacuated. Her face did not crumble immediately. It went blank first, the way screens go blank before an error message appears. She stood at the entrance for 4 full seconds, veil trailing behind her, bouquet in her right hand. A bouquet she had bought herself from a grocery store that morning when Julian did not deliver, and tried to make the room match the picture in her head. It did not match. Through the shared wall, the sounds of Ballroom A carried into Ballroom B in muffled fragments, confusion first, then a voice rising above the rest, sharp and brittle, the way glass sounds right before it breaks. Suki looked at me. Her hand found my arm and pressed once. Not a pull, not a push. Just a reminder that the floor was solid and the room was real, and the 219 people here were here because something good had happened, not because something bad was happening 30 feet away. The gala continued. The hospital director spoke about the pediatric wing, about families who drove 3 hours for treatment, about nurses who worked double shifts because the ward was always full. Then the fundraising chair introduced me. The walk to the podium took 12 steps. Each one felt different from the last, the way steps feel when you are walking toward something instead of away from it. 6 months ago, I was planning a wedding. Yesterday, I was planning this gala. The difference is simple. Tonight, every dollar spent in this room goes to people who actually need it. And every person in this room was invited because they were wanted here. 219 people applauded. Julian, standing near the back with eucalyptus stains on his sleeves, raised his glass of sparkling water. To the woman who gave me my first wedding job and taught me that flowers are not decorations, he said, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. They are the way a room says welcome. This room is saying it tonight because of her. The tables near him applauded again. Then the ones behind them. Then the whole room. One more time. Softer. Now, warmer. The kind of applause that is not for a speech, but for a person. And then, at the edge of the room, movement near the glass doors that separated Ballroom B from the hallway. A figure in white. Bianca stood on the other side of the glass, one hand pressed flat against the surface, her veil pushed back behind her ears, mascara tracing 2 dark lines down her cheeks like rain on a window. Behind her, the hallway was chaos. Wedding guests clustering in small, confused groups. Barbara's voice cutting through the noise. Nolan standing 6 feet from his bride, with his hands in his pockets, and his jaw set in the particular way of a man who has just learned something he cannot unlearn. Through the glass, the gala was everything the wedding was supposed to be. Warm light, full tables, flowers climbing toward the ceiling, music playing softly under the hum of 200 conversations, laughter, glasses clinking, the sound of people who were glad to be somewhere. Our eyes met. For a moment, the room, the speech, the applause, the hospital director, the flowers, all of it compressed into the space between 2 sisters, separated by a pane of glass that might as well have been 18 years thick. She waited for a wave, an invitation, a crack in the door, some sign that the strong one was still in there, still willing to absorb the damage and smooth it over and make the room beautiful again. The sign did not come. 3 seconds. Then my eyes returned to the podium, to the microphone, to the room full of people who had not asked me to prove my worth before letting me through the door. In the hallway, Barbara Pruitt was discovering that volume does not equal authority. She stood in front of Theo Banks, who waited with his hands behind his back, and the expression of a man who had managed other people's worst days for 22 years. "Transfer the services back to the wedding immediately," Barbara said, loud enough for the hallway to echo. "We are the clients." Theo's voice was even unhurried, the verbal equivalent of a wall that has no intention of moving. "Ma'am, the contract is between Morrow Events and Beaumont Hall. The services were directed by the contract holder to Ballroom B for a charitable event. You are not a party to this agreement. If you wish to discuss the matter further, you are welcome to contact the contract holder directly." Barbara opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The retired school principal, the woman who had spent 30 years being obeyed by classrooms full of children, stood in a hallway, being told no by a venue manager, and there was nothing in her training that covered this particular lesson. She turned to Warren. He had been standing 3 feet behind her the entire time, watching the scene with the expression of a man observing a weather system he had predicted arrive exactly on schedule. "Barbara," Warren said quietly. "She banned the only person who was paying for everything. What exactly did you think would happen?" Barbara stared at her husband, as though he had spoken in a language she did not recognize. Warren held the look for 2 seconds, the way someone holds a door open just long enough for the other person to decide whether to walk through it, and then turned and walked down the hallway. Away from Ballroom A. Away from the empty chairs and the bare arch and the wedding that had become a room with nothing inside it but 120 people trying to understand what had gone wrong. He walked into Ballroom B, past the registration table, past the name tags, past Julian's flowers and DeAndre's crab station and Maggie's quiet camera. He walked to the donation table, took out his wallet, wrote a check, and placed it in the glass bowl. No words, no introduction, no request for a name tag or a seat. Then he turned, found the stage with his eyes, nodded once in the direction of the woman standing behind the podium, and walked back out into the hallway where his wife was still standing, with her mouth half open and her authority half gone. The check was for $500. The nod was worth more. Nolan had not moved from his spot 6 feet behind Bianca. His hands were still in his pockets. His face held the expression of a man standing at a fork in a road he had been warned about and chose to ignore. He looked at his bride, still pressed against the glass, still waiting for a door that was not going to open. He looked at the empty ballroom behind them, the chairs that would never hold a reception, the arch that would never frame a kiss. And then he looked at the floor, the way men look at floors when the thing they need to say is too heavy to say while looking at anyone's face. He did not speak, not yet. But the silence he carried out of that hallway had a weight to it that Bianca would feel for a very long time. Sunday morning. The apartment was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. Not the silence of waiting or planning, the silence of after. The gala had raised $68,000 for the pediatric wing. Maggie had stayed until midnight, photographing donors and families who brought their children in pajamas to see the room where the money for their care was being raised. Julian had given away his centerpieces to guests as they left. DeAndre had sent leftover crab cakes home with Suki, who ate 3 in the car and called them unreasonably good. The phone sat on the kitchen counter. 14 missed calls from Bianca. 3 from Colleen. 1 voicemail from Nolan. His voice was careful and tired, the voice of a man who had spent 12 hours watching 2 versions of his future collapse into each other. Celeste. This is Nolan. I should have said something. Weeks ago, when Barbara first suggested it, I should have said this is wrong. I did not. And I am sorry. The message ended. The phone went back on the counter. Not deleted. Not returned. Just set down. The way you set down something you are not finished thinking about. Suki had texted at 7 that morning. Savannah Morning News. Front page of the living section. A photograph by Maggie Odom, full color, filling half the page. Ballroom B. Julian's flowers framing the podium. 200 faces turned toward the light. And at the center, a woman in a dark blue dress who looked like she had been standing there her whole life. The headline read, Local Event Coordinator Turns Personal Setback into Record, Breaking Children's Hospital Fundraiser. In the donor sidebar, halfway down, Warren Pruitt, $500. Not all of them, just one. But one was enough to prove that a family name is not a verdict. The phone buzzed. Colleen. Celeste. Her voice was raw, stripped of the softness she usually wore like a cardigan. I am sorry. I should have said something years ago. About the letter. About all of it. You did say something, Mom. You said let her have her day. Every single time. For 18 years. A sound on the other end. Not crying exactly. The sound of a woman hearing her own sentence repeated back and recognizing it for the first time as what it was. I love you, Mom, but I am done being the strong one. Not because I am angry, because the strong one was never who I was. She was who I became because nobody told me I was allowed to be anything else. The call ended without a goodbye. With the silence that comes after the truest thing you have ever said finds its way out of your mouth and into the air, where it can finally stop being carried. One more thing to do. A text to Bianca. Not a call. A call would invite argument, and this was not an argument. It was a boundary, and boundaries are best delivered in writing, where they cannot be interrupted or talked around. I love you, but I cannot be the person who pays for everything and gets nothing back. When you are ready to be my sister without a price tag, I will be here, but I will not be waiting." The phone went face down on the counter, gently, the way you close a book you have finished reading. The kitchen table was empty. For the first time in as long as memory reached, there were no contracts on it. No spreadsheets, no vendor confirmations, no loan statements. Just a coffee mug, still warm, and a letter from a man who should have said something sooner, folded once, leaning against the salt shaker like it belonged there. Outside, Savannah was doing what Savannah does on a Sunday morning. Church bells from 3 directions, Spanish moss catching light that had no schedule and no deadline. The woman at the table did not reach for her phone, did not open her laptop, did not check whether Bianca had read the text or whether the newspaper had been shared online. She drank her coffee. She read the letter one more time, and when she set it down, she placed it next to the mug, not back in the box, because boxes are for keeping things and pockets are for carrying things, but tables are for things that have finally found a place to rest. If there is someone in your life who only calls when they need something, this story was for you. And if you have ever been the strong one, the one who pays, the one who shows up even when nobody saved a seat, then hear this. Love does not have a cover charge. It either lets you in or it does not. And if it does not, you find a different door. You have probably met someone like Celeste. Maybe you are someone like Celeste, the one who picks up the phone every time, the one who writes the check before anyone asks, the one who confuses being useful with being loved, because somewhere along the way, somebody taught you that your value lives in your wallet and not in your presence. Here is what Celeste learned the hard way. Generosity without a boundary is not kindness. It is a pattern, and patterns do not stop until someone names them out loud. The people who love you will stay when you show up empty-handed. The ones who leave were never sitting at your table. They were sitting at your expense. Have you ever paid for something that should have been free? Have you ever stayed quiet because speaking up meant losing someone who was already gone? If this story reminded you of your own kitchen table, your own phone calls, your own silence, tell me about it. You are not the only one who carried too much for too long.